Frank Popolizio, how we doing, sir?
Good, doing good, doing good. I've been busier than hell.
Man, every time I look up, you got a new event, a new camp tour. I've never seen someone who works so hard.
Yeah, I think I needed a vacation without without wrestling tied into it or farming. I need a vacation.
What kind of farming are you doing these days?
We've been doing a lot of beef. Thanksgiving, we do Thanksgiving turkeys. You'll hear the cows start yelling. They're out of hay right now, so I gotta feed them. But yeah, we do Thanksgiving turkeys. We do about 100 of them. So we raise organic turkeys, and they're getting ready to see their maker.
And you do all this, or do you have someone else doing it for you?
I raise them. I don't do the processing. We have a group of Mennonites that are out in Hoosick Falls, New York, that do the processing part. They do thousands of birds for Thanksgiving, or leading up to Thanksgiving. And they do a great job. Fantastic. You specialize in it.
Wow, what a niche market.
Yeah, it's exactly. Because I'll tell you what, when I didn't know they existed, I was doing it. And I did it with a guy that has a farm just a couple miles away, and he does about 700 birds a year. And I had no idea how hard it was to find a processor. It was the first year I did it, and thank God for him, because he saved me. Because I mean, I just wouldn't have had any idea how to clean that many birds that fast.
That's
It's
a
and it's a it's a tough gig. You
it's a
grow the
huge number.
Yeah, it's not even that. It's the fact that you build a relationship with the animal, and then you know, you gotta end its life. So
I never thought about that part of it.
that's the worst part of it. If you ever done any farming, and that part is the part that's it's just difficult. I mean, you get somewhat immune to it, but it's you don't ever really get disconnected from it.
And so your focus is on farming and wrestling. How do you divvy up the time? Does wrestling take up most of it?
Wrestling takes up a tremendous amount of time, and I don't really have employees, so I do have people that help me the day of, when we produce an event. So leading up to it gets very stressful. You're doing all aspects of planning, organizing, creating, marketing. It just becomes it's a heavy lift. So wrestling is everything, right? And then from a work standpoint, and then you got family life. You got to have balance. Something I struggled with early on. Probably my biggest struggle. Became obsessive about work. Not that I'm not now, but I've definitely balanced out.
Did you have like a come to Jesus moment to change that?
Yeah, with my wife. She was Jesus.
What happened? Was it just years and years of
We
going?
were, well, it just, you got young people in your life, your children, that they're only, they're only that age for a short period of time. And you either are going to know them in the proper way, or you're not. And once the ship sails, it sails. And I listen, I still struggle with it, but it's I'm way more in balance than I was, earlier on. I mean, I if I got to get up early when people are sleeping, then I do that.
Mm-hmm.
And if I got to stay up late while people are sleeping, then I do that. I'm a grinder, so I'm good at you know, that part of it where I can do some self-induced suffering, and not look like I'm falling apart at the seams. I've been up this morning. I got up at 2. Uh,
No.
I didn't plan on it, but my body woke up at 2, and then I tried to go back to sleep. I worked for about an hour, and then I went back for maybe an hour and a half, and then I got up at 4:45. I tried to go hunting because I'd like to do something fun. at least in my world. Right. And then, so I stayed in the woods till about 8 o'clock in the morning. And then I've been working since. I'm going to try to go back in, and then I'll work again, so it's, I don't know if people see that part of it. Not that, I mean, everybody works. I'm not sitting here telling you I'm doing anything different than the next guy, but I don't know if they realize how much planning and work is associated with something as you would look at it as like, hey, they're just going to do some duels next week over in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. That should be pretty easy. Doesn't work like that.
Not the case. Now, before we get on to all the stuff you have coming up, what kind of things are you hunting for at 4:30 in the morning? You're talking to someone who lives in Chicago city limits here.
Well, I got up at 4:30. By the time I get to my tree stand, it's probably 5:40 in the morning. It's blackout, and you sit and wait for the sun to come up, and you get in the woods before, the deer start moving.
Is this bow or is this gun?
Yeah, it's bows. It's actually crossbow in New York State. Just had a crossbow season started.
Crossbow, really? So like the medieval crossbows?
No, they're a little bit stronger than the medieval time period, but yeah, it is still, obviously it's a super powerful and accurate weapon.
So do you know of like Cameron Haynes? You ever heard of that guy?
No.
He's a professional bow hunter and goes on, has a podcast, goes on a bunch of stuff, but he opened up my eyes to how intense it is. Like he goes out there sleeping overnight, hiking, and really, I didn't realize how close you got to get to kill an animal with a bow compared to a gun.
Yep. And so that's a whole nother level. Those are the Mike Zaddicks, the Bill Zaddicks, Randy Couture, and those guys. They get into it, but they're also hunting in the big open country, right? And it's a whole different world. If you go see where Mike Zaddick hunts and what he does from a guiding standpoint, it'll make your head spin. Really make your head spin. And at any given moment, you could have a major storm come in, and you're dealing with the adversity of being way out in the countryside.
He goes hard for the hunting, from what I hear.
Really hard, and he gets everything from mountain lions to elk. You should have him on your show sometime. He's a tremendous guy, and he's very interesting.
Yeah, I just about a month ago I was texting him to get him on, and he's like, "I'd love to come on, but I have hunting guides until December." That's what I'm like. This guy takes it serious.
No, it's a way of life. We had the real fortune of going out with my family to visit Mike at his home, and it was at first my wife was very concerned that we were going to intermix wrestling with vacation, and she knew Mike, but not that well, right? And tell you, it was one of the best vacations we ever had. It was like the movie A River Runs Through It. It was literally like that, picturesque. He lives on the side of a river in remote Montana. There is very little cell service. The nearest store is about 30 miles away. So when you're coming in, people make phone calls, say, "Do you need water? Do you need paper towels? I'll bring them up for you." Pull up some of that stuff. Really, like it's a lifestyle, and my kids absolutely loved it. They loved it.
So you guys like hiking, tenting, all that?
Riding horses, spotting animals, carving things. He's got a buddy that even made a knife for us. Like sewing, sheathing for your knifing, just all kinds of good things. And then we ate moose. We fished. We did a lot of good things.
Man, that sounds awesome. He's he'll be on this this winter, hopefully. And we just had Bill on last week, which was great. And I think Mike's probably just a little more extreme than that.
Yeah, great. I can't say enough. I'm a big fan.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. And, I can't say enough about you, man, bringing the college jewels. Last year was the first year. I know you got a lot of stuff going on, but let's start with this. Year 2 for the college duels. Was there ever any doubt you were going to do it again?
Well, we had some competition. I think some other people saw it and wanted to try to do it maybe slightly differently and add their little, twist to it. And so they went after it and tried to really take it away and essentially steal the idea. So we fought back. I fought back, and I was pretty tenacious about year 2. And thank God, many of the teams saw value in what we did on year 1, that we were really a pioneer of profit sharing with teams. I'm not saying it didn't exist before, but not in the same capacity, where every single body that participated got a percentage of the total pot. So it's a different kind of creature, right? When people support the event, they're directly supporting all those programs in college wrestling by default. And so that was different, and I think that the teams recognized that, realized that, and ultimately stayed the course. Many of them did. Some others, I think just started looking in a different direction. Maybe didn't like the date as much as, once they thought about it and in their total prep for the season. So it is what it is, but we managed to get to year 2 and we put together a solid field. Now that you look at some of the way things are shaking out with rankings and how the teams are developing, even though we're right out of the gate, but there's some good squads in there. Good
Definitely.
squads.
So how did it bubble up to you that there's another organization trying to do these duels? And was this right after or over the summer? Like, how did that happen?
Started getting some intelligence on it, probably starting in April, when they started organizing and trying to get some backing behind it too. And it was a legitimate, it was legit. It was a fight. It's no different, it's no different than anything that we do in the world here. That, if it's a good idea, people are going to want to try to expand on it.
And so you fought tooth and nail. We're back,
Yep.
secured. I'm sure it just comes down to the relationships and, like you said, the uniqueness of the event. You mentioned the profit sharing. How does that work? Is it because it's through Rockfin and that's how you
Yep.
guys track it all?
Yep, that's right. Pay-per-view and new subscriptions and things like that. There's a formula, and the channel is unique. So every year it's a different channel that we've created so that it doesn't get commingled. But the teams that were part of year 1 are still on the second year are still going to get a profit sharing check. It's just not going to be obviously as big because the residual diminishes as the event ages.
Mm-hmm. And it's in New Orleans this year?
This year is New Orleans, and that's a story in itself, because if it weren't for the Ravanac family, I think the fight would have been even a little bit harder. But because they have such a great name, Jim Ravanac specifically, in wrestling, if you look back, he was the president of USA Wrestling for he had quite a tenure there, and then he kind of stepped back a little bit, and people may have forgotten the presence that this guy had. He has such an impeccable reputation, and so when he heard about the duels, he wanted to be involved. He wanted it in his community, and so he reached out to me and was like, "Hey, what do we got to do to get it down here?" And I really didn't have. I was indifferent really about going anywhere. I just knew it needed to be a neutral site.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as I started to dig deeper into it, I realized he was really popular among many of the college coaches, and it was a feather in our cap to, when I say partner up, just going to Louisiana and have his I guess him tied to it, so we're in their neck of the woods, and we'll get to feel their flair.
It'll be cool because, he was the guy behind Gator Wrestling Club for all those
That's right.
years.
Yep. We supposedly from what I understand, at least right now, Daniel Cormier will be coming to town for the event. You know, you look at a guy like Pendleton, he was attached to the Gator Club. You got Scott, you know, Coleman Scott, UNC, he was attached to it. Schwab had support from Ravanac as well. You know, you start going through the list. My brother Pat was connected, you know, as well. And it just keeps, you know, it keeps going and going. So it made sense, right? It made sense.
And it's a warm weather place. And if folks are in the area, I know it's majority pay-per-view, but you can go and watch in person as well.
Yeah, it's an event, right? It's a real event. Heck, the day before, we have a high school segment. We have like Melvin Prep, we have Blair, Lake Highland. You know, there's five total team CBAs coming in out of New Jersey. You got Green Farms Academy out of Connecticut. You got 5 squads that are going to do a round robin on the high school side. That'll happen on the 18th, and then the college follows. But also on the 18th is the Saints versus the Falcons.
Wow.
And the stadium is right in the city of New Orleans. So right where we're doing the wrestling is right where they're doing the football. You know, people can make a real trip of it. And we're seeing that.
Man, that's cool because I didn't realize that the high school duels were the day before. So like
Yep.
in the same venue and everything, or
Everything. Same setup, same mats are down. We're going to do it on, you know, we're doing it on Rockfin.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great, you know, and believe it or not, I get a lot of college coaches have been texting me like, we're coming down to watch the duels. So they're probably going to do a little recruiting there, you know.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, look, I pulled up the schedule here. Like you said, Blair, Malvern Prep, Lake Highland. I mean, some studs.
Yep.
So I could just see this growing into like a week-long escapade of just awesome wrestling.
I don't know if I can do a week. I'm just telling you, it's a lot to get through 3 days. Is going to be a big burden. But yeah, I mean that was the idea. Really, the idea was Willie Saylor to add a high school portion of it. So I want to give credit where credit is due. He was the one where like, you know, this needs to evolve into this. So he did it.
Well, when you're working with the big dogs, like the Division I programs that are coming, you know, the best programs in college wrestling, that's a whole nother level of professionalism that I'm sure they expect when they're going to something like this.
Yep. It's you know, those guys are the best of the best, and it's in some ways it's easier dealing with those guys, you know, but you can't be asleep at the wheel. You got to know, you know, that you're going into this thing. The priority has to be for the teams on the ground. For me, that's how I've always looked at it. Whether it's how we structure weigh-ins or the fight certain battles about where people can warm up. Those things are important by the time competition ends and what time do they have to make weight the next morning. You know, can we delay it an extra hour so that stuff matters? Instead of getting up at 6, that athlete can get up at 7. You may think of it like it's no big deal, but it is. When in its totality, it all adds up. And I've always tried to have the mind of a coach or look through their lens. And I think that helps, you know, I really do. I think it helps because you keep getting better and you get more efficient, and it just adds to the professionalism of everything.
And are you also running your club still, or have you focused to strictly events?
We run a club as well. I'm still running it. I'll give you a little piece of the pie here and tell you that we are looking to bring in somebody, actively looking to hire somebody as our head coach, because they're still doing that and just burning. I feel like in order to do it right and give these guys what they've had, which is everything, right? And give them the proper guidance and to do it in a thorough capacity. I may be selling them short, by putting so much time onto the event side. So I got Sean Miller is the best, got to be one of the best youth coaches in the country, right? I got guys like Johnny Paris, who wrestled for my brother over at Binghamton. Dan Palmerino wrestled for Brockport. We got Robert Hamlin, two-time NCAA runner-up from Lehigh. That's just naming a few. And these guys, by and large, do it for a small stipend. And we have great influence, tremendous influence with these guys. And then there's several high school coaches, general high school coaches that are doing it. Chris Capizzuti, Steve Carani. I mean, these guys, people end up knowing these guys because of our events, but they're really good coaches, right? And they're worried about our area and having the opportunity to produce guys. We continuously produce Division I guys. You know, statistics say you get less than 1% will go on to wrestle at the NCAA Division I. Less than 1%. It's 0.9. And every year we're banging out a couple. Some years better than others. You know, we just came off of one of our best runs where we have guys like we had Poulin, Del Signor, you got Dorfman is in there, and Sheldon now is at Buffalo. These are guys that have been with us for a really long time. Harvard's got a heavyweight. Crooks came through at the same time. Stein's at UTC. These guys are starting to contribute, right? And they just came out of our club. So statistically, we're beating the odds, but I can't do it alone. And I think it's time to bring in, and hopefully by the end of this year, we'll know who that is.
And you looking for someone to be fresh out of college or previous coaching experience?
I'm actually looking, we're interviewing a couple guys that have been coaching at the D1 level. So we're gonna make hopefully it's a big jump.
I mean, now the high school age level, you look at what some of these kids did at these opens last weekend. The high school level is so legit now that the club coaching, what you guys are doing, I know you're working with middle schoolers as well, but it is the attention has never been higher, and the need for these kids has never been more intense.
That was literally the commercial that I gave when talking to some of the coaches that I was recruiting to interview, right? Just like that, just what you said. It's never been more intense. It's never been more. I don't look at it like a step down. If anything, it's I think a greater opportunity. You know, things are changing, and I think this is a good opportunity.
Well, Sean Bourmet, when he took over Overtime, he was at Wisconsin, stepped away from being an assistant at Wisconsin, and led Overtime. And it was one of the best wrestling academies for the better part of a decade. And then he goes on, does so well, he gets catapulted back to Michigan. I mean, it's like the academy scene is super legit.
Yep. That's exactly. And I also articulated that it may act as a catapult. You got some, didn't Dresser come out of as a high school coach, right? Goodale is another one. There's a few guys that have successfully, and you talk about Bourmet, right?
Scott Green.
Yeah. Scott Green was a legend in the Section 4 area, New York State. You know, at one point, Section 4, the southern tier of New York was brutal to go over there. He had a Shamrock Club. Guys like Donnie Vincent were coming out of there, and Kyle Dake, and they're torturing people. You know, it was a torture chamber.
I was going to ask you to remind me of where you're at and where in relation to where the Shamrock Club was at, because everyone talks about that club.
Yep. So we're in Albany, New York. The southern tier is about 2 hours away, maybe a little bit further, 2 hours and change. But there's these pockets in the state that have had committed guys, and they've done a really, really good job when you start looking around and producing the state as a whole. Long Island, you got like Vogar and Patrovich and Fatigliano, right? These guys did really, really good stuff down on Long Island. And then, so that they have their own world. And then, you got Beat the Streets doing things with New York City. And then you go Albany area, right? That's where we live, and we'd like to think we're contributing.
That's journeyman
And then,
country. Hell yeah.
yeah, and then you got, the southern tier is another area, and then you got up north, like the guys up on the Canadian border, where like Mitch and John Clark came from. There's a club in Governor, Bear, that who wrestles at Binghamton. His dad, drive these guys all over God's creation, and it proves, why not you? You don't have to be from some place to be great. You can't get more rural. They're on the Canadian border.
Mm-hmm.
They're on the other side of the the Adirondacks, which is like, I don't know, is it 7-8 million acres, forever wild? You
Wow.
talk about being in the middle of nowhere and being able to produce. Those guys are a good example of that. But the state as a whole has got some really good characters.
What about where Yanni's from? What part is that, near Rochester area? What
Yeah.
Is there like a club out there? Or?
Yeah, called Elias is the club. His dad. His dad would train certain guys and those that were tough enough to follow. I'm not going to speak for him, but he had a real knack at convincing people to suffer in a professional environment. And I would talk to him and get advice from him every chance I could. He also is connected with Vogar too, so they work in tandem with one another. But yeah, Yak Mahalis and crew were deadly.
You talk about two legends coming through New York high school, Vito and Yanni. I mean, the fact that those guys are on the same team, wrestled in high school, only one loss between the two of them. Like, New York is crazy loaded when you think about all the talent coming through there.
Yeah, there's been, I mean, look, we're not as deep. That's the truth, right? But there's the best guys over time could have been the best guys anywhere. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an accurate statement. Heck, I look back in the fact that back in the day, I got nearly killed by Troy Bazakis. And that's a name that you hear now, right? The Bazakis kids that are coming through. And I remember dealing with that.
How so?
torture chamber. But he was so unbelievable, the pace that he would wrestle at. Again, New York guy, right? We've had some of the real greats come. Piccinini is another one. Jansen, I mean, you go
Nickerson.
Yeah, Nickerson, who coaches at Northern Colorado, and Steve-O. You start going through the list, and some of those guys are really, really awesome.
And then I was talking to Steve Silver recently for a documentary we're working on, and he reminded me that it used to be only the section champs that went to New York State, like 12-man, 16-man brackets.
Yeah, so it would be, I think you would have, there's 11 sections, right? Long Island is broken up into 2 sections. So there's 11 actual sections, and then they would invite the Catholic schools and the public schools. So cumulatively, you'd have 13 people in a 16-man bracket, and they would give buys. There was no wild card. There was no other way to get into the tournament other than winning your section. And by default, I never made it. I was second in the section. I lost to JP Epifanio, who was a stud and a half too. He was a multiple time state place finisher, but he never got the opportunity to go. It's done different now. And mind you, it was a single class. So it was just one state champion, one tournament, 13 guys per weight. It was very, very, it was still an honor to be when you won it. And you know what was great? I'll tell you what, guys like Frank Fraunhofer, who was a 3-time New York State champion, and he's from one of the smallest schools in New York State. Nick Gwizdowski, back in that era, it was one class, and a guy like Fraunhofer wins it multiple times. There was many guys like that could win it didn't matter. Small school, big school, it didn't matter at all. They were hammers.
And
did
how
it.
many guys, we all know how this is, like one section's more deep than another. Like I'm sure there's one section in New York that's just stupid loaded. And how many guys got like second or third that were maybe like junior All-Americans or like, could have been state champs anywhere.
You start looking at Long Island and you can go down some serious rabbit holes. Those guys are so good and they're so dense in population, right? And so if you're back in the day, if you were second or third, nobody ever heard of you. And you never heard of you. Never heard of you. And you guys went on to make their way. They would find it, but it's just it was hard. It was really hard to get it done. But yeah,
do they do team champs in New York? Has there been any like legendary teams?
So one of the things that I was really vocal about was creating a dual meet state championship. And several years ago, they enacted it and they listened, because if I thought we were really missing the boat with that. And they do it now, and it is one of the best things that the state does. They love it, and it's a small school, big school championship. They also have, scoring at the state individual tournament as well.
And is that still one division in New York?
No, we have two.
Two.
And so when COVID hit and we didn't have a state championship, I ran one of them.
In Pennsylvania,
created
right?
one, and we brought it to Pennsylvania. So we had the New York State Championships in Pennsylvania, and every good guy, the lion's share of all of the veteran guys, decorated guys, participated. It was not a fraud, right? It was a legit tournament, and we did a single class, and it was the first time, I think, in 17 years that had happened. So single class, it was a hammer tournament, and people loved it.
And that's when you guys were practicing under tents.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We had multiple guys come out of that tent to go wrestle Division I. Brock Del Signor, Dorfman's wrestling at Virginia, Stein's wrestling at UTC, Shell's wrestling at Buffalo, Crooks is wrestling at Harvard, and you got
wow.
I think there was one other. There's a couple others. Oh, Reed Douglas wrestles at Presbyterian, and then other guys went D3. Rosini at Oswego. I mean, like it was really just, and there wasn't a lot of guys. We just were hammering it outside in a tent. And in October in New York, it gets kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love about you. You're just always making things happen, pulling things together. And what's the event coming up in Bethlehem? College duels?
Yes. So about 20 something years ago, I had an idea that I wanted to do like a dual jamboree, dual meets. I really love dual meets, and I wanted high-end teams to participate in it. I like good dual meet matches. I don't necessarily care if the teams are ranked teams. I just want good duels, just competitive duels. And so we started the Northeast Duels. And when I started that process, I was told, you're crazy. It's never going to work. And we did. It worked, and it was an awesome run. And then COVID kind of squashed it a little bit before COVID, but we started getting into doing the round robins. Teams didn't necessarily they didn't like, I'll call it like it is. Nobody wants to wrestle anybody, right? They were like, yeah, I don't know.
Is that real? That these big time coaches don't want to wrestle their schools?
Well, and there's reasoning behind it, and none of it is bad. It's the truth that they have deep schedules. If you're in the Big Ten, the hell you want to sign up for to see Virginia Tech, in November, right? And not everybody, but like that's sometimes the mentality. You gotta peak, right? At the end, it's what really matters. And then you're trying to mix these two worlds where, what people may want to see, and then what's the benefit for the team. So nobody's really wrong at all. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to try. And so we started this process and went back to it this year. And we're doing it in the Lehigh Valley. So we're in Bethlehem. We're in a high school that seats 3,000 people. I think we can do some damage there and fill it up pretty good. We got a pep band coming, spirit band, and we got some really good matchups. Snyder's coming home, right? Brian Snyder's from the Lehigh Valley. He's coming home. He's going to be a part of it. You got Labriola in there, right? He's going to be a part of it. There's a bunch of guys I know. My brother recruits extensively out of Pennsylvania. So you got some really, you got the hometown factor, hometown crew coming in, and you got some big matches. You got 3 real big marquee matches where you got Nebraska versus NC State.
Yep.
You got Lehigh versus Oklahoma, and you got Rutgers versus Arizona State. And then you got some matches like Nebraska versus Army, or Long Island versus Sacred Heart. Going to be a good duel, right? It may not have a ton of ranked guys in, but it's going to be a competitive duel. It's going to be parity, right? And it's pretty cool. NC State's going to wrestle Lock Haven. That'll be a good scrappy match. Scott Moore always does a good job. He gets these guys ready and ornery and mean and tough. So you got a lot of those. That's happening. And then the day after, we do a round robin event where we've kind of done a really good job at mastering elaborate, like modified round robins. And
so like an individual tournament on Sunday, or in Saturdays, the duels. Okay. Got it.
It's a unique event though. The round robins, we lead the way, I think, in the country at producing an event like this, because when you look at what you have with an open, there's a lot of ambiguity. What time will we end? How many matches are the matches going to count? Non-D1 and things like that. We get everybody 3 to 4 matches. We're done by 2:30. Have a nice day.
Beautiful.
Like quality and kind. The A's and the B's wrestle each other, and the B's and the C's wrestle each other, of developing guys with developing guys, and guys that are veteran guys wrestling veteran guys. So we work hard at that. It's a pain, but we get through it.
And the reason you do it is to bring this D1 wrestling level to your area so your kids can see it. Or you're going to Pennsylvania this time, so it's not New York. I guess.
That's
so why
how this all started, and it's true. So 5 days later, or 6 days later, in Albany, New York, Iowa's coming to town. Right?
Oh,
Iowa's
shit.
making a stop at Army, and then after Army, they were kind enough to drive down the Northway, another hour and a half, and wrestle in Albany. And they're going to wrestle Buffalo and Sacred Heart. NC State's going to wrestle Illinois and Central Michigan. You got Castleton, which is the closest D3 team. They're in Castleton, Vermont. They're going to wrestle the College of New Jersey. And
Dude,
so
look at you go.
You got Buffalo's wrestling Illinois. I mean, you got some really good. There's going to be some good matches, right? And you got to see it if you want to be it. You got to get in there and actually see it and aspire to be it. And there's no better way. And I'm going to go to a meeting tonight at 7:00, and I'll have all the programs for our area. And I'm going to light them up. I'm going to light them up and say, and it's going to get uncomfortable, because, people are busy. We're all busy, you and I included. And if we don't make it a point to do it, other things will fill the void. And it's a disservice, I think, if we don't really go out of our way to bring the youth to see that. And when I say youth, it's everything from, peewees up to high school. They got to see it.
And they'll never forget it. I mean, just to watch a Division I guy warm up, or like just, see him on the bench, it's exciting, and to see it up close.
So the truth is, 2008 was the last time the entire Iowa team was in the state of New York.
Wow.
I'm not talking about wrestling at Madison Square Garden for the NCAA tournament. I'm talking about dual meet, Albany area, upstate New York. It was 2008. And so what are we going to wait? You know, if we let this opportunity pass, there's people who maybe go their whole lifetime and never get to see it again, unless you get on an airplane and go fly out to, you know, either Penn State where they're, and you got to try to get a ticket for that. Good luck. You know, if you don't have a connection there, or go to Iowa, right, to see that stuff.
Yeah.
And so we're bringing it here. We got to seal the deal. You got to seal the deal.
Even people like Tom Ryan, he talks about when he was a freshman at Hofstra, Iowa wrestled Penn, I believe, or Penn State. And he said just to go and watch them. He had never watched Iowa in a dual meet. And so he wanted to go watch, even though he was at Hofstra. And just the excitement of watching, I think it was Branson and Steve Martin that year, or Jimmy Martin, one of the two. He said it was amazing. And that influenced him to go there. And so you think about even one kid sees that and, you know, they're around Spencer Lee. It's like, could impact their whole life.
Yep.
Very cool. Let me ask you this before we wind down. You mentioned Albany a couple of times, and I just can't stop thinking about the year the NCAs were there. Who was behind that initiative to get the NCAs in Albany?
That's a good question. I think I know in our own wrestling community, Jacqueline Bombard was a guy. He's a Queensberry coach. He's a Hall of Fame coach, New York State chapter, upstate, and he was instrumental in getting the proper people involved to say, let's consider having this at Albany. When you look at the way things are today, I don't know if we win that battle, you know, in present day, but we were really lucky to have it in Albany, New York. Just small arena, you know, it was a real intimate environment.
Yeah, that was
Cal won his fourth title there.
And I think that was also the year that ESPN was following Iowa around for the season. And
what a great documentary.
Oh my God, that was awesome. And it was
Zadok in there.
Yeah. His parents were the stars of that show. They really were.
Right. That's right.
Well, Frank, it's always great to have you on. You're welcome at any time, man. I last want to congratulate you. Every time I look, there's a new news segment on you, but you know, I noticed there was something recently. What was that about?
I just got word that I'm going to go into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame for the Order of Merit, which is obviously a you know, it's a real blessing and a great recognition from the hall.
Congrats, man. That is incredible and long overdue in my opinion, but I mean, Order of Merit, that's a huge honor, and I'm sure you're in you know, all kinds of organizations and associations, but that's Cooperstown.
Oh, that's right. Cooperstown in our world, that's his, and the beauty is I get to go back to Stillwater, where my brother's career really started, and that's what gave me such tremendous opportunity, because I met guys like Pat Smith. I had no idea, you know, I knew him as a wrestler, but that started my journey really with building those relationships with guys like Pat Smith, John Smith, and then from there, subsequently it branched out. But yeah, that's where it started.
That car ride with Pat Smith, I'll never forget that story.
Neither will I, because I lived it.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Coach Popolizio. And if there's anything we can do for you, just let us know. You guys, you do a great job. You're the best in the game. Appreciate it.